One Piece. I mean, do I even need to introduce it at this point? Everyone and their grandmother knows what One Piece is. It's one of the biggest manga of all time. But here's a question for you. What came before One Piece? Yep, One Piece was not Eiichiro Oda's first manga. In fact, our boy Oda has been cooking since his teenage years, scribbling out all kinds of wild stories that helped him build the skills to eventually drop his magnum opus. Today we're diving into Wanted, a compilation volume that brings together Oda's early works, and let me tell you, this stuff is chaotic in the best way possible. We're talking everything from western shootouts to isekai style sword fights with dragons. It's like flipping through some kind of Oda multiverse. Story number 1, Wanted. Yep, the same name as the collection. Very fitting. This was Oda's first debut piece, the first story he ever submitted and the one that got him noticed. Not only did it win multiple awards, but it also scored him a job at Weekly Shonen Jump. Oda actually wrote Wanted when he was just 17 years old in high school. Yeah, while most of us were struggling to stay awake in math class, this guy was out here chasing a manga career. But here's where it gets a little bit more wild. While working on the story, Oda got into a traffic accident, but luckily it wasn't major. At that point, he still only had 7 pages left to draw. But thankfully, he was discharged from the hospital the next day. And instead of taking time to recover, he sat down and finished all 7 pages in a single day to meet the submission deadline. It's a pretty intense story, and it kind of shows just how serious he was about making manga from such an early age. The story itself, well, think about cowboys, ghosts, and some very early signs of that, classic Oda madness we all know and love today. It's just really interesting to see how those initial sparks and exaggerated face expressions that are still prevalent in his work today. Story number 2, God's Gift for the Future. This one's about a pickpocket who just loves stealing wallets. That's his thing. Not subtle about it either. He's practically speedrunning petty crime. But apparently God's had enough. So what does God do? He pulls out a death note? Yeah, no joke. God literally writes the guy's name down because he's sick of him wasting space on Earth. So technically Oda came up with Death Note concept way before Death Note was even a thing. That's wild to think about. In the afterword, Oda shares a fun bit of self-reflection. He says he loves drawing explosions and destruction scenes, but he's not really sure why, since he's not a destructive person himself. He's like, I don't want to break anything in real life, but on paper, let's let everything go boom. Honestly, relatable. Who doesn't love seeing things just explode and fall apart? Maybe not in reality, but in television. Story number 3, Iki Yako. Now, it's not completely clear where this story fits into Oda's timeline, but it was definitely submitted to Shonen Jump at some point, so it's part of his pre-One Piece journey. The story follows a wandering monk who's, wandering. It's never really explained where he's going, he's just kind of on the move, like a chill spiritual road trip of some sort. But then, boom, he gets attacked by a demonic spirit out of nowhere. Not the kind of travel experience you would want. He barely makes it out alive and stumbles into a village nearby, just looking for a place to crash for the night. But as soon as the villagers see the monk, they light up. Turns out they're really hoping he'll help them get rid of that same evil spirit that attacked him. It's a cool little story with some nice tension and action. Interestingly, this one feels a bit more graphic than Oda's earlier works. There's more blood and there's way more impact when the characters get hurt. It just feels like Oda was starting to get more comfortable pushing that boundaries just a bit, testing out darker tones while still kind of keeping his trademark style. Pretty cool. Story number 4, Monsters. Okay, I admit I might have exaggerated slightly when I was talking about an isekai manga where you fight dragons. I mean, Monsters isn't exactly an isekai, but hey, it does feature a dragon fighting a samurai, which kind of gives off those vibes. The setting still has that wandering hero feel, but instead of gunslingers and cowboy hats, we got a sword-wielding samurai roaming into the town. So think Wild West, but you can swap the revolvers for katanas. Oda drew this one when he was 19, during his time working as a manga assistant, and you can really start to see how much his art was evolving. It's rough in places, sure, but it's also the closest so far to the modern Oda style we recognize from One Piece. The character designs, the motion, the way he frames the action, it's all starting to come together here. Compared to the earlier stories, Monsters has a lot more dynamic action scenes, and you can tell Oda was getting more confident drawing fights. I mean, he even has a 2-page spread where the samurai is cutting the dragon's head off. It's fast-paced, stylish, and gives a pretty exciting glimpse at the kind of storytelling that Oda was gearing up to do. Story number 5, Romance Dawn. Wait a second, isn't this just One Piece? It's literally the same name as the first chapter of One Piece. Well, yes and no. This is Romance Dawn, Oda's early pirate manga that eventually evolved into One Piece. He first came up with the concept back in junior high, believe it or not. But it didn't really take shape until years later when he was working as an assistant to Nobuhiro Watsuki, the creator of Rurouni Kenshin. During that time, Oda kept refining the idea, polishing up the world, the characters, and the tone until he was finally ready to submit it to Weekly Shonen Jump. Now, Luffy's still the main character here, but there are a few key differences. For one, instead of his grandpa Garp being a strict marine, he's a pirate himself, and he's the one who gives Luffy the straw hat and encourages him to chase his own pirate dreams. Kind of a role reversal. There are also some early versions of familiar characters. One of the girls Luffy meets, for example, looks very similar to Nami, like she walked in from another timeline. Romance Dawn just feels like a parallel universe One Piece. It's not quite the version that we are familiar with, but the DNA is definitely there. And for longtime fans, it's a really cool glimpse into how Oda's ideas evolved over time. And that's Wanted, a collection of Oda's early work before One Piece took over the world. Overall, I thought it was pretty fun and chill read. None of the stories are super heavy. They're more like creative experiments, each built around a fun idea or concept. It's a laid-back collection that gives you a glimpse into Oda's growth as a storyteller and artist. Even if you're not a One Piece fan, which I don't know what's wrong with you if you're not a One Piece fan, but I digress, I still recommend checking it out. It's short, entertaining, and it's just cool to see his growth. Thank you again for tuning in. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to show some love, guys. Like, comment, maybe even subscribe if you're feeling generous. Until next time, I've been your host, Rich Taku, and I will be signing off.